Welcome to Enjoy the Journey podcast, where we interview expert entrepreneurs and thought leaders to help guide you in pursuit of financial freedom. Presented to you by Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, where we help service-based business owners remove cash flow bottlenecks, maximize their profits, and turn business profits into personal wealth. G'day guys, this is Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, and we're here for another episode of the Enjoy the Journey podcast. And we're doing something a little bit different today. I've got an amazing guest and a good friend of mine, Tony Fraser-Jones from the Profitable Tradie, dialing in all the way from NZ, our NZ brothers. And we wanted to have a little bit of a conversation around investing as a New Zealander, as a Kiwi, what it's like to invest as a successful entrepreneur, hopefully sharing some of Tony's experiences over the years of how he's been able to build wealth off the back of his successful business, and hopefully giving you guys a little bit of confidence around how you continue to scale your wealth into the future. So let's start with, mate, who are you and what do you do?
I have a business coaching business called Profitable Tradie. So we work with the owners of plumbing, electrical, and similar service business owners, painters, glazers, tilers, landscapers, that kind of thing. We basically help them improve profits, put systems and processes into their business, and just make life and business a whole lot more fun, because it's hard work sometimes. So that's not what the aim of the game is. It's to have some fun and enjoy life. So that's the business side of it. And then I've always enjoyed investing as well. So in property and lately in some other things as well. Yeah, just keen to hang out, mate, and have some yarns.
Fantastic, mate. So that's great. So if you look back on your journey so far, Tony, obviously you've been in business for quite a long while. What would you say has been your biggest success in business so far?
That's a great question. I guess the thing I'm actually most proud, we have a business that makes great profit, and that definitely helps with life. But the thing I'm most proud of, biggest success, is that I've taken what is typically a service-based kind of advisory model where you sell time, coach people one-on-one, and that's how I started off. And now we actually have a business which has sort of 10 employees. It's a multi-million-dollar revenue and profit business. I'm not on the tools anymore. It's a proper business. We have a COO who runs the business. And I can actually focus on the stuff that I enjoy and that I love, which is creating stuff, coming up with new ideas. And I guess looking back sort of 10, 11 years ago when I kicked off this business, and I was basically cold calling people out of the phone book to book appointments and try and sell them coaching and business advisory. I never even realized that was possible. It was a thing to do what we've done. I'm super proud of that. The fact that what we do has a tremendous impact on people. So we've built an amazing team, and that's something I'm passionate about. Absolutely amazing team, great culture. So we are growing, great employees. And the cool thing about that is that allows us to impact the clients and change their view of business and life. And then that impacts their family, their friends, their clients. So the ripple effect of what we do, I think, is really powerful. And I get a heck of a lot of satisfaction out of that. 3 or 4 years ago, it would be a money thing, but now it's more of an impact and a satisfaction thing, and being able to actually write the rules to live or run a business the way you want to.
100%. I think that's what it's all about, Tony, right? Like, I think, of course, we all get into business because we want to make money for ourselves. But when we really discover that purpose and the impact and being able to practice what we preach and lead from the front, I think it's really inspiring, because I expect that's what all of your clients want to create for themselves too. They want to get off the tools. They want to create some more flexibility. They want to create a proper business, not just a thing of trading time for money, right?
It's not always beer and skittles. It's not always easy. Don't get me wrong, as you know, but there's tremendous feeling of satisfaction about actually having built something, and something that works for you, and then that obviously works for all the clients and has an impact. So that's a pretty cool win for me.
I love that. Fantastic. So, mate, I know that business can be all consuming. We put a lot of time, effort, and energy and stress and sacrifice into business. So at what point did you realize that wealth building was actually needing to become a focus and needed more of your attention?
This whole malarkey of wealth creation started by reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I suppose is the same for most of us. So I went to university and then worked in a corporate job for 5 years when I left university, and started reading personal development and business books during that time, and realized that the corporate life was just, I was a square peg in a round hole, or whatever it is. It just wasn't me. I started saving money really hard out, I had no idea what to do with it. I started buying some shares here and there and had some wins and had some losses. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing, to be honest. I was buying on stockbroker tips, mate. That's a bad idea. Finished the job, was with a company called Accenture, which are a large, massive global company. So I learned lots of cool stuff. I went and bought a burger fuel restaurant. So that's a gourmet burger franchise. So there's not many of them in Oz, but there's definitely a bunch in New Zealand and a bunch in UAE and other places. So the Kiwis listening will know what I mean. So I got a burger fuel restaurant. I thought that's going to be the way to crush it wealth-wise. We did that. And basically I started the wealth creation process by buying some property. I think it was 2004, 140,000. The first house we bought needed $28,000 deposit, my wife and I, and we bought another house relatively soon afterwards as well. And I can remember mopping the floor at night at Burger Fuel when everyone else was at home, and I was mopping the darn floor thinking, at least these properties are going up in value. Because it was like it was 2004, 2005, 2006 when things were really cranking up. And I got a lot of satisfaction in it. So I realized, I guess, pretty early on, it was important to do something to grow your wealth. And it's been focused pretty much ever since.
Fantastic, mate. And if you think back to the beginning, like obviously you were dabbling in the stock market, you then got into property. What was your attitude at the time towards investing? Would you say that you were very aggressive, or were you playing it safe? Like if you think about your behaviors that you were exhibiting at the time, how would you explain it?
I'm probably relatively conservative and by nature, although a lot of people probably look at me and say, no, you run a business, you invest. I mean, but whatever. So I did a lot of research. And like when we bought our first property, it was like, yeah, there's a bit of apprehension and fear involved, 100%. I don't know. I just did it because I thought I've got to do something, try something. And I learned by that. So I guess it was one of curiosity. I want to make this investing thing work because I can see how that's a ticket to actually creating some freedom down the track. So yeah, I'm not really sure what my attitude was, but it was definitely, I'd give it a crack. And I didn't bloody know what I was doing, to be honest. And maybe we'll talk about that later, some of the mistakes, but it was definitely one of curiosity and just getting in and giving it a go, really.
Makes sense, mate. And do you feel that you were kind of throwing a dart at the dartboard when you bought those first properties, or did you have a bit of a research methodology that led you?
I wanted to buy cash flow positive. And so the only house I could find in Hamilton that seemed to look like it would do that was this particular house, 140,000. I think it was renting for 250 or 260 at the time. So it was about cash flow positive. And that's why. Yeah. And then I found another one which was relatively similar, bought that. And then the house behind that came up for sale and we bought that as well. And they were all kind of cash flow positive or neutral at worst. That's kind of was my approach.
Makes sense. And that's very much the kind of Robert Kiyosaki style approach, right? Buy cash flow, which is great. So if you look back on those decisions that you made, I guess what's been your biggest accomplishment in wealth so far, Tony?
We've got a pretty substantial net worth now. I think that's something that I'm proud of in the sense that, not because it's money, but it's because when you start investing, it feels like it's just never going to happen. It feels like success is so far away. Like when we started investing and the goal was to have $1 million net worth, and it's like, I'm starting from, a few tens of thousands. How in the heck are we ever going to get there? Most people feel like that. And what I say is like, you just got to build the habit. I guess that's probably the biggest thing I'm proud of, to be honest, and this is a mistake. When I sold Burger Fuel, I sold that. I put $35,000 in and I came out with $330,000 cash. So that was a nice little win over 4 years. And we went into a property business, actually buying and selling property, doing renovations, doing a bunch of stuff, and lease options, rent to buy, contemporaneous settlements. We tried it. We advertised privately, like we did the We Buy Houses thing. I don't know if people might know. Have a van out there and posters and mail drops and the whole thing. So you try and buy privately. That went really good until 2007 into 2008 when the GFC happened. And I nearly lost everything. Negative cash flow because I had a bunch of properties that I was looking to sell. Interest rates were 10.5%. I needed around $100,000 extra just to pay the interest. That was more than the rents and stuff. So it was a pretty tricky time. Got to the point where Bronwyn's parents, very generous people, would buy the kids' clothes for a period of 12 months. We were living off the smell of an oily rag. We might manage to get through. And I guess what I'm probably proudest of is actually getting through that, holding a bunch of properties. I managed to hold 6 or 7 properties, and I still hold those today, and they're worth, multi-millions now because the capital growth has had its time to do its magic. I could have lost everything, had to start from scratch, but I managed to scrape through. So that's probably What I'm really
I think a lot of people I've heard of that very similar scenario, and I think some other people have not been so fortunate to be able to get through. And I think the thing that most people overlook is because I think most people, when they think of property, they think it's pretty safe, right? I think it's pretty much a sure thing. And look, sure, property in areas like Australia and New Zealand and most of the developed world is done really well. It's been very consistent. But the big downside is that it's illiquid. And when those cash flows do go negative, we're talking huge amounts of cash flow shortfalls that if you don't have the cash flow to support it, particularly if you're in small business and your business is doing it tough at the same time, it could be really difficult to keep that afloat. And many people are forced to fire sell at a big discount just to save themselves from going bankrupt. So I think looking back on that experience, is there anything that you would have done differently, Tony?
Probably the one thing I was good at was buying at discount. So I learned how to buy at discount. So I'd buy, 20% under market. So I had equity at purchase. What I started to do was I'd buy these houses at a discount and then I'd refinance them back up to 80% of their new market value after a quick reno. So one, for example, I bought for 370. It was worth 510 when I bought it. I did a quick reno, got a new valuation at 530 and then borrowed 80% of 530. So, which is cool, but I've got a bunch more debt. Interest rates go up. There's no way the rent's going to cover all that. And so I had several things I did like that. That's great in a rising market because you can use the equity to pay the negative cash flow. As soon as things tighten, the banks take the umbrella away when it's raining and interest rates are 10.5%, you've got massive problems. And that's what I had. So the big lesson there is you've got to have cash flow. And there'll be some people listening to this who haven't experienced that market. They've just experienced this craziness over the last 4 or 5 years. The music does stop at some time. It always stops at some time. So you're much better to, and if you're making your money out of buying and selling houses, if that's your income, you've got a double problem, which is what I had, because you won't be able to buy them, sell them the same. So you need to either make the holds you've got have some solid cash flow, or you need some cash flow from somewhere else.
Because there's so many business owners that I've spoken to that love property. They want to do property as a business, and it's a tough game. Like it's everything's risk versus return in this world, right? And you've only got to look at the people who default big time and go bankrupt most often, and it's property developers and people who are in that property space, right? And my view has always been make sure that your core business, so if it's a trade business or whether it's a coaching business or whatever it is, make sure that that's always your core because you've got more consistency of cash flow in that type of business, even in downturns. Like trades typically do pretty well through recessions because everyone needs them, right? And then you take the cash flow and you put that into property.
Focus on investments that give you some cash flow as well. If you're in a really rising market, there's definitely some say easy money, but nothing's easy. There's always a price, whether it's emotional or mental decisions you've got to make. You can definitely create a lot of wealth in a rising market in property, and that's great, and that's worked well for us. We could have definitely done more if we'd been a bit more aggressive, but you need a fallback position. Cash flow is important, or maybe don't keep leveraging them up. Get your LVR down so that if it does turn, you can flick a couple of properties even at a via sale price, and you've got some cash. So have a fallback position because, like you said, when the market tanks, the economy tanks as well, and so all your routes of escape are shut down. Funding shut down. Your profit shut down, the equity shut down, and your liquidity is shut down.
It makes it really tough. Yeah. And look, I think in the New Zealand market, I think the conversation at the moment is around these negative gearing and these tax deductibility rules that are coming in. And everyone's kind of fearful of what's going to happen to the property market. And I understand that obviously the New Zealand property market overall has gone gangbusters. In many areas, it's probably outpaced Australia, like Sydney and Melbourne. So they're obviously wanting to put some water on to cool the fire. And this is one of the strategies that we're implementing. So for you as a sophisticated investor and someone with a lot of experience in property, what's your view on the New Zealand property market over the coming years, mate?
I guess there's a couple of things. One, a lot of what's happening in New Zealand is political. People are making decisions in government who really don't understand the property market. Some of their decisions are actually having perverse consequences. So, for example, they've put a lot of effort into healthy homes, trying to stop people putting rents up. They can only do it once a year, getting rid of fixed term tenancies, a whole bunch of stuff. And I actually support making the standards for rental properties higher. I think that's great. But it's sometimes killing an ant with a sledgehammer. What's actually happening is that rents are going up significantly because landlords are like, well, this is crazy. And there's still a shortage of houses. So the fundamental problem is not evil landlords or speculators or all this nonsense that media likes to talk about. Fundamentally, there's a supply issue, there's a lack of housing, there's more demand than people want. Until we fix that, there is definitely some robustness in the economy. Having said that, look, there are definitely some headwinds. Interest rates are going up, which is going to make costs more. And if you can't deduct the interest, then that's obviously going to make your costs more as well. But the thing is, new houses, you can deduct interest. So if you actually build new builds, your deductibility is still there, which is great. And I think that's cool because more houses will fix the supply problem. But at the same time, all the best property is existing property. It's got the best location. So the property that you're not going to get tax deductibility on is probably going to be the stuff that appreciates more because it's in the center of town. So it's like you push it down here and it'll pop up here. If you have a good strategy, you buy quality, if you look to build some positive, good cash flow into your properties, or you've got a good business, then I think it's still part of the equation. Is it going to go up 15, 20% next year and the year after? Probably not.
Yeah, it's interesting, mate, because we've seen these things play out in the past. Like in the US in the 80s, they took out negative gearing. They had a very similar system to Australia and New Zealand. They removed it. And as a result, the property market sat flat for about 10 years. But the property, that someone's always got to pay for the difference. And if it's the tax man not footing the bill anymore, then the tenant needs to foot the bill. So then the US property market shifted from more of a capital growth play to more of a yield play. That's why in the US, you can get 10% yielding residential property, sometimes even more. And in Australia, they toyed with that for a while, but I guess New Zealand and Australia are unique, whereas I feel we have very similar values to property, that we live and breathe property. Whereas people in the US, I think they see property as, hey, I want to own my home, but they're not so much property investors. They'd prefer to speculate on the share market. So for that reason, I feel that this is obviously going to cool things down a little bit, but I think you're exactly right. If you buy good quality blue chip properties in desirable areas, it comes down to supply and demand at the end of the day. There is only a limited supply of those kinds of properties where affluent families want to be in the long term. And that's where the growth is going to be. And the scenario I always go through with my clients is I always get them to plan for the worst possible cash flow scenario. So let's assume the government doesn't cover any of the tax. And let's just treat that as cream on top. And then let's make sure that we can actually afford to hold on to that property if none of those rules even existed. So I think that's probably a safe place to go, right?
Like it's future-proofing everything because interest rates are on the rise and they always rise quicker than they fall. And so it's future-proofing that. You're better to have a couple of solid properties than 5 or 6, kind of. That's one thing I've learned, and just make it easy, because if you hold them for long enough, it will cover all the sins. The key is having the cash flow to do that. Because most of us are not going to build the cash flow initially that we want to retire out of property. It's probably a longer term game. Maybe we have to pay some down or whatever to generate that cash flow, but it will build a lot of wealth, which we can use, for other things.
And I think that's where other asset classes come into play. So Tony, are you still investing in the share market?
So historically it's been property and paying down debt. So we paid a lot of debt down, but I realized when I looked at property, whilst it's given us a heck of a load of equity, millions of dollars of equity, if I want to use that, I can't really live on it because I have to sell it. And to me, that's crazy because it's cannibalizing your asset base. So, that's like my net worth is going down. I'd rather it keep going up. So what we've done in the last 2.5 years is actually really diversify our investment approach. Well, the areas we've gone into is commercial property. We've started to invest in the share market, and we've started to invest in some alternative investments in the US, which have been really cool, which we can talk a bit about. The reason I've done this, though, is I realized that my return on my equity in the property is about 2%, a few $100,000 worth of passive income. You need tens of millions of dollars worth of property. Yep. So I sort of like, well, that's probably doable, but, it's going to take a while. It's a lot of hard work and it's more risk and stuff. So what we've done is focused on things that will generate more cash flow. So we've got the wealth. I mean, I'd rather have more cash flow than more wealth because you can just keep using the cash flow. If someone said an extra $5 million net worth or an extra $300,000 passive income, I'd take the $300,000 passive income and you can use it over and over again. So what we've done is commercial property, syndicates, and a bunch of different types of syndicates in the US and some funds for the share market. The best investment I've got is my business. Like, that makes a lot of money, and investing money into your business is always a great return. So, if you want to get a new staff member and they cost $100,000, you only need to make $30,000 extra. That's 30%. You won't get that return anywhere else, really. So that's a good investment. Next thing is, because I'm busy, I don't have the time to become the expert at commercial property or other investments. So the big lesson that I've learned, this has been a game changer for me, is finding excellent people. So finding people who I know, like, and trust, who have access to deals that I can invest in. So it's basically just sign a bit of paper and send the money type of thing. That has been a game changer for me.
Beautiful. So let's talk a little bit about commercial, mate, because I do get a lot of questions, particularly from business owners about commercial, and it's normally one of two things. It's like, hey, should I buy my own premises? And my conversation normally with them is, well, hey, if you do buy your own premises, it's great because it's money that's not going to the landlord. But hey, if you're a high growth business, you're probably going to grow out of it at some point in the future. And then is that really going to still be a good asset to hold? And then obviously when we're investing in commercial for an investment where we've got a tenant in there, we've got a lot of eggs in the small business basket, right? And obviously we've got to consider the diversification. So what's been your experience with commercial so far, mate? Has it been positive, negative, indifferent?
It's been very positive. And the reason is I haven't bought a single asset. I have a fund. I know a guy who runs commercial property syndicates, and he has his family invests in every syndicate. They take a 10 or 12% stake. So for me, skin in the game is everything. Massive. And they basically invest in industrial property. So they'll get a fund. The investors put in 10 million. We borrow 10 million and we buy maybe 4 or 5 properties of the $4 to $5 million bracket, and we spread them around the country. So you've got diversification, you've got that in huge demand. I just send them the check. It's killer. And the returns are, 6-7%. They're a little, some of them, the newer ones are a little bit less because yields have gone down. 5-6-7% yield, plus all the capital growth in these assets is no hands-on investment is killer. So I think, that's worked really well for us. I've thought about buying commercial property for our own business. The reason I haven't is I'm just lazy. I just couldn't be bothered with the work, frankly.
And it's probably not best use of your time, mate. When you consider the opportunity cost there compared to investing your time elsewhere, it's probably not worth it.
But I have a bunch of our clients who have bought their own premises, and I think for them, and in Australia, when you can put it in your self-managed super fund as well, that's worked really well for a lot of these guys. A lot.
At least it's an asset at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, that's right. They're buying two tenancies so they can kick the other one out.
Exactly. I love that. I love that idea. You buy bigger, you subdivide, rent out a part, and then you can grow into it over time. That's great. But I really love that tip, mate, about investing in these funds because, commercial can be risky because obviously if it is vacant, it can be vacant for a very long amount of time. So if you've got a fund where you can spread that risk, and it might obviously take a couple of % off your yield, but at least it's not going to have you hemorrhaging cash trying to float that property until you get a tenant.
And the thing about this particular type of fund is because we're investing in, the latest property we bought was 9 million, but we're investing in a part of the market that the mums and dads don't invest in, 1 to 2 million. We're not really investing in the ones where the big institutional investors want to invest. So there's this mid-market. It's still competitive, but because the guy's an expert, he actually buys stuff that's pretty good. So whilst there's some management fee, it's not huge, and it's probably going to be better than you'd achieve yourself anyway with none of the risk.
Makes sense. Yeah, look, and I think that's where it pays to get good advice, right? Experts who can see an opportunity in the market and can execute on it, and then you can just ride the wave. So let's talk a little bit about the syndicates, because I've heard a bit about this. It's obviously a more sophisticated strategy for people who've already got kind of a decent foundation of wealth. But do you want to give us a little bit of a rundown of how it works?
Yep. So the syndicate is really simple. There are 100 shares, and each share is worth around $100,000. And you put in your money. They buy the properties, and you get the check, every month or every couple of months. And they basically just tell you when they're buying a property, give you the information, give you a monthly report. It's a limited partnership, I think, from an accounting perspective. I don't really understand that too much. My wife deals with that because I'm not a details guy. So it's that simple. And the thing that works is they invest in the properties themselves. For me, when I heard that, I'm like, sweet, I'm cool. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it's pretty simple, those syndicates.
Fantastic. And what kind of properties are they buying in the States, Tony?
In the States, I think they have access to a bunch of investment instruments that we don't in Australia and New Zealand. There's a large sort of middle market, not mums and dads, not the massive institutional investors. So they do everything. So we're in funds that buy credit card debt and rehabilitate it, and they pay 12%. We're in a funds that do a bunch of, I don't even know what some of the deals are, property deals, and but they have them all round the place. So there's diversification play, and they pay 8% plus capital growth. So all up, it's maybe 13 to 15%. Where in other ones where you lend money for people to do renovations, there's so much different stuff. There's another one that we're in, which is a self-storage fund. So they have 5 or 6 self-storage unit or businesses that they've bought that they put together into a fund. Yeah, and basically you put the money in and you get the payments back. It's so simple, but you meet the people, you see what they're doing, you put the money in, you start seeing the money coming back, and look, this actually works. So it's been a bit of a mind bend to think about investing in another country, but it's just new. It's not risky. It's just different.
You just got to learn the ropes, right? And I think you're right here, mate. In the States, they've got just a creative way of looking at these different deals, and that you just don't get here. And look, obviously, it is a bit more of a sophisticated strategy. Obviously, we wouldn't suggest it to people who are just getting started as your first investment, but it's a great way to create an alternative asset class that's often negatively correlated to what your other things in your portfolio are doing, right?
So yeah, significant cash flow, which is fun. But yeah, felt like people who are kicking off, and a lot. I mean, one of the things I love doing is talking about our team members about how to invest, because they're where I was 15 or 20 years ago. 100% getting a fund. Even if it's an index fund, which is something you suggest, and you just start chipping away. You start every month putting the money in, dollar cost averaging. Just get into the habit, and then all of a sudden you'll find your $5,000 turns into 15, and then it's 50. And then it's 120, and you can, if you want to, you can invest in property or try some other stuff.
100%. Yeah, I think the fundamental thing, particularly for business owners, is that people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10. And I think all of us, because we're in high growth businesses, like in a trade business, it's so quick to be able to turn that corner, to go from 30K a month to 100K a month. Like you can do it in a few months, right? We've seen businesses in their first year do $1 million in their trade business. But then they think about, wealth. Well, I'm going to be saving $2,000 a month. I'm not going to be able to buy my first investment property for another 2 years. Stuff it. That's not worth my time. But it is, because it's a compounding exercise. It's a marathon. And I think being impatient when it comes to wealth is not a good trait. You need to have patience and be able to stick to a boring plan, because the best strategy should be boring, right?
I reckon that's the key. Is wealth isn't about money. It's about an attitude and a habit. So wealth doesn't come from money. It comes from the behavior and the attitude and the habit. And if you just keep compounding it and just keep ticking it over, it'll happen. Obviously, if you can contribute more, it'll happen more quickly. But the earlier you start, the more regularly, that's like the key to success.
100%. I think that's hit the nail on the head, mate. So for any New Zealand business owners that are watching this or listening to this, mate, what would be your top 3 tips from everything that you've learned that will help set them up for financial success with their wealth?
Yeah, the first thing is know and show the numbers in your business. Like that's absolutely critical. So you have to have transparency on the profitability that you have in your business, and so you know what the heck's going on. So and that's understanding your pricing, having a P&L run, being on your cash flow, making sure your receivables are all tight. The second thing is grow the profitability in your business. So create an engine for investment. So build your business and make it more profitable. And the third thing is start the habit of investing. So start with what you've got now. Even if it is $50 a week, I don't care. That's the key. Find a fund and put it in there and just keep doing it before you've even seen it. And if you do that, then when you increase your cash flow in your business, then you can put a bit more aside. That would be the formula I'd suggest.
Beautiful. I think that's a great tips, mate. I think that's a key for success for anyone investing. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. And I think that's the formula for getting things right when it comes to your money. So fantastic, mate. Well, look, I appreciate you making the time. I appreciate you sharing your experiences and your wisdom so openly and honestly. I think this is one of the things we need to talk more about our money, because I think there's a lot of taboos around money and finance, and just people hold their cards to their chest. And I think if we can share more openly and honestly, we can help more people get inspired to actually take this stuff seriously. So I really appreciate you making the time, mate, and looking forward to chatting again soon.